looks like everybody's here. Are we ready? So I'll call to order the work session for the Oregon City Commission for Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020. We had an exec session previous to this. Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle-Smith. Here. Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Here.
What?
I don't know how to turn it on. So I've asked if you could turn the camera again.
So if you guys are on the phone.
Hold on just a second. There. All right. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. And for those of you on the phone, you will be muted up until the time that that Katie asks you to go ahead and come online with us. And we'll go on with this 20-281 sanitary sewer infiltration and inflow program. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor and City Commissioners. So tonight, myself and Bob Balgos are going to do this presentation on infiltration and inflow. Bob has been with the city for about a year and a half now, and this is his first commission presentation. So this topic's kind of come and gone. So he's about as nervous as you get when it comes to having to be in front of the city commission. So he's ready, but he's ready to go. So, and he's got his camera on. So thank you for that. Just a reminder, last time we spoke about this topic was in May of 2019. Murray Smith has been our consultant that's kind of helped us through the program, and they are still working, we're still working with them. We'd like to get through this pretty quickly. Really, we're looking for some direction from you tonight, and I know it's not a decision-making meeting, but just kind of some affirmation or not of, how to move forward with this program. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of the lateral replacement costs, and some time schedules that we might consider for how to, if we're going to charge the customers, how to pay that back. So the agenda, again, we know you know what I&I or inflow and infiltration is, so that's kind of old news for you. We're gonna go through that pretty quickly. A refresher on our 5-year recommended capital improvement plan. We really want to spend time on item number 3. The city code and updates to chapters 1308 and 1304 were included in your packet. I'll just say that we're not going to cover much tonight on that topic, but we are bringing some code changes related to this forward in the June 9th meeting. So you'll have that as well. And then just some standards and some of the fee discussions really is what we're kind of wanting to hear from you on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Balgos, and he's going to go through this tonight. Bob?
Hello. First, I just want to thank the mayor and commissioners for allowing us to present this topic tonight. And just want to start off with going over very briefly about the definition of inflow and infiltration, just for a quick refresher. So inflow sources are sources where surface water enters the sanitary sewer system. These sources are typically illegal connections, such as roof drains, foundation drains, and stormwater catch basins. These may appear on public right-of-way or on private property. Infiltration sources are sources where groundwater enters a sanitary sewer system. Defective pipe joints, broken pipes, aging infrastructure are the common causes of infiltration. I&I is a problem because clean water is being conveyed to the wastewater treatment plant, where this additional flow can raise rates unnecessarily to the customers. So over the recent years, our consultant Murray Smith has conducted an analysis of our sanitary sewer system. Data that our consultant used for the analysis came from flow metering, smoke testing, TV inspections, and field verifications. The findings concluded older areas in the city turns out to be the leakiest basins. In this map, you see 4 different meter basins, color-coded in yellow, red, green, and purple. Just want to emphasize that the meter basin boundaries do not follow the neighborhood boundaries in exact, although these basins have designated names associated to the neighborhoods it primarily covers. The thick red lines represent infiltration sources found in our sanitary system. From Murray Smith's analysis, the 2 leakiest basins in the city come from basins 8 and 10, where basin 8 is primarily in McLaughlin and Basin 10 in Rivercrest. These two basins make up 30% of the city's entire sanitary system, where most of the I&I is present. We are proposing for full rehabilitation in these two target areas. The blue and green dots represent inflow sources. The difference, the blue dots are sources found on private property and green dots within public right-of-way. In the Sellers Meter Basin in purple, we are proposing further I&I investigation, which includes installing flow meter, collecting data, and coming up with an approach to address the area. Now that we have identified the problem areas in the sanitary system, we have worked with Murray Smith, put together a CIP project list for the next 5 years. This pilot program does not set precedents throughout the city for the repair work, but in the worst leaking areas. The result of the pilot program will tell us whether to continue addressing other areas in the future. And this is done by examining the amount of I&I reduction after the projects have been completed. As you see, each project has its associated costs totaling up to $10.4 million. From our previous slide, the inflow sources represented by the blue and green dots total up to $1.8 million. At this time, the storm extension project is underway. In fact, the design is complete and the bid opening for the project was recently held, and we'll be seeking an award for a construction contract here in June 17th. As also mentioned from the previous slide, we will be targeting the two leakiest basins and continue to investigate the Sellers Point Basin. The ongoing I&I and structural renewal program covers I&I program management and addressing aging sanitary sewer infrastructure outside of the targeted areas, which includes investigation, engineering, and construction costs. So here, going over very briefly, we just have a breakdown of the projects mentioned in the previous slide based on the city's annual budget. Just want to note that the first 2 years are already budgeted in the current biennium budget. So I ran an exercise for the purposes of determining the average lateral length in the two targeted basins. What you see here is one area south of Waterboard Park and the other area south of Rivercrest Park. The two samples I selected were a little different from one another. One area had your standard typical connections from main lines that ran underneath the public roads, and the other area where main lines were installed in the rear yards of private properties. I discovered that several service laterals in areas where main lines were installed in rear yards were much lengthier compared to the standard typical connections. With a total of 133 laterals observed in these two samples, the average private lateral length came out to be 40 feet. The code and standards we currently have in place is as follows. Section 2.16 in our sewer design standard states, building sewers are installed and maintained by property owners, and no roof, surface foundation, or stormwater drain lines shall be connected to the public sewer. The city's responsibilities in maintaining the lateral is from the main line connection up to the face of curb or edge of pavement. This provision is very difficult to enforce because of the invasiveness on private property, though the proposed policy, when adopted, will implement the enforcement. The downspout disconnection projects will also follow suit after the adoption of the policy. So there are three methods that are commonly used for lateral repairs: open trench, pipe bursting, and cured in place. Each method has its advantages and disadvantages. Open cut is the most traditional method, but requires extensive restoration and can run up the cost. Trenchless technologies such as pipe bursting and cured in place are the least invasive methods in terms of ground disturbance on private property. The average cost per linear foot for each method was taken from a cost analysis conducted by Murray Smith, where two public projects within the region were taken into consideration. These average repair costs include mobilization, restoration, erosion and sediment control, permitting, cleanout installation, and post-construction video inspections. We are requiring 2 cleanouts to be installed for future maintenance, monitoring, and testing. From our calculations and the study of costs associated to the private lateral repair, we have concluded that the average cost in repairing a lateral to be $8,400 each. This was factoring in the average cost of the three methods and the average length of private lateral in the city, as mentioned in the previous slide. In the next couple of slides, I'll be going over three different rate proposals of shared costs for the private lateral repair, which is the most important part of this presentation. Now, before I jump into this slide, I just want to mention that there are a range of options that other cities and districts have implemented to pay for work on private property. Some are fully funded by the agency and others are funded by the homeowners. From our meeting back in May of 2019 with this group, the commission was in favor of sharing costs with the homeowners. So that is what we'll be moving forward with. The first option you see here is the flat rate option. This option is a fixed fee of the repair work and will apply to all customers. What is provided are the dollar amounts based on the percentage of the customer's share of the repair cost. The commission will ultimately decide which fee schedule will be selected for the policy. The advantages of the flat rate option is it's a fixed fee and customers know what to expect. Other agencies where lateral repair is funded by the homeowners commonly use this rate option. A disadvantage of this option may be that some customers with very lengthy laterals will benefit more than those with shorter laterals. The second option is a tiered rate option. Rather than one fixed fee for all customers, this option provides three separate tiers based on length of laterals. Three bundles are broken down by ranges of lateral lengths. These ranges were configured using the sample sets from the two target areas that was mentioned in the previous slide, where a third of the sample size fell in the 0 to 30 feet, a third in the 30 to 40 feet, and the remaining third to be laterals greater than 40 feet. The advantage of this option is that customers can save money by paying what is appropriate with their existing lateral. The disadvantage of this option are the varied costs that can seem unfair from one customer to another. The other is the unknown of what the homeowner has to pay until their existing lateral length is dug up and verified, which may come up to surprise to some homeowners. The third and last option is the variable rate option. In this option, the cost to the customer is based on the true length of the lateral on the private property. The disadvantage of this option are it may be very costly to those who have very lengthy laterals, and the administrative efforts that come about with this option are substantial. So with the three rate proposals, we are recommending option one, the flat rate option. It is the best option because it is equitable to all customers. Customers know what to expect, and administrative efforts are kept at a minimum. Also want to note that any of these options can be paid in two different ways by the customer. One way is to pay in full and lump sum, and the other is through an installment agreement over a period of time along with an administrative fee.
One of the things that I told Bob I'd add in here is, as we gather more and more information about lateral repair costs of our own, based on our own scenario in Oregon City, on a few years of lateral repair, we would obviously come back and reevaluate these numbers. But based on the information we have, we think they're good planning numbers. Oh, one other piece to that is, I've heard, we haven't really sat down with Wes, but you heard from them at the last work session as well, wanting to be partners on this. I kind of wonder if there isn't an opportunity there to partner with them to help fund some of that customer requirement piece.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, that's a good question.
you were at the last West Advisory Committee meeting. Was any of that discussed?
No, the INI was discussed a little bit, but not in that depth, and they were mostly focusing on the update on the outfill project.
Okay, so can you put that on your list of things to discuss with them at the next one?
Okay.
Yeah,
all right, thank you.
Some staff are talking about it as well, so we'll follow up.
Talking about it here.
They weren't talking specifically about what I'm talking about, which is more just how do we partner with that so that maybe they can help move that.
Well, until Wes signs an agreement,
It's
you
all-
can't
all
believe
bets
anything
are
you
off.
say, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So here's the overview of the implementation process and how we get to the policy adoption and ultimately to rehabilitate and repair the sanitary system to reduce I&I. In the next couple of months, we are anticipating presenting to the 2 neighborhood associations, or actually this month of June, we will be presenting to them. Concurrently, we'll be updating city code and sanitary sewer standards, which I'll go over the next slide. These updates triggers land use, so we'll need to go through the legislative process. If all goes as planned, we could achieve approval of the I&I policy, city code, and sewer standard updates during summer of 2020. Once after, we can begin the televising work on the private laterals. This step is necessary to determine the conditions of the pipe. Immediately after, property owners will get notified whether the lateral needs repaired or not. If a repair is needed, the property owners will receive letters that will provide them the choice to opt in or opt out of the program. Just want to note that this information is yet to be presented. Following the notification letters, we can move forward with bidding the repair work in spring of 2021, then to construction in summer of 2021. Once the first phase is completed, we will repeat the sequence to the next phase and so forth. This will continue until the 2 target areas are complete in the next 5 years. As mentioned in the previous slide, during the I&I policy adoption, we will also be updating city code and sanitary sewer standards. We are seeking to update chapters 1308 that include the additional right of entry for pipe inspections, addition of the service lateral improvement program, addition of failure to comply with rules, and other updates that will benefit the I&I policy. We will also take this opportunity to make some minor clarifications to existing code in chapter 13.04. And lastly, we will be updating some language in the sanitary sewer design standards that prohibits inflow and infiltration to the city's sanitary sewer system. Minor clarifications are also added to this update. So as of today, our outreach has been limited, but the understanding of the problem is high, and the feedback we have received has been quite constructive. We have spoken to this group back in May of 2019, and the development stakeholder group and the citizen involvement committee in late of 2019. During those meetings, we presented the cost of $1,200 to the customer for the lateral repair, but this number has obviously been adjusted, which you have seen in this presentation. Moving forward and with city direction, we will be starting the land use process and ramping up our public outreach targets for the areas identified for work in the next couple of years.
So I think this slide's mine. Tonight we're kind of hoping to reaffirm that you think we're headed in the right direction. These various fee models, we think simple and straightforward is the right direction to go. Payback periods of, we've been talking about 24 months. So 24 to 48 months is kind of the timelines that we've been looking at. And then if you have any other concerns or items that you'd like to share, we're definitely interested in your feedback. We're pretty early in the process.
Questions? Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, thank you. John, have you thought about doing sort of a little mini sample to try to see, just take a little area in either one of the neighborhoods and see kind of what the situation is to give you a better assessment of what really is going on? I mean, you know, maybe 3 or 4 households and say, okay, they've got generally this situation, I mean, without having to scope the pipe, but I mean, they've got this situation, because is it every household in those 2 neighborhoods, or it's some households, or?
Yeah, for the most part, we know a lot about the main lines, but we don't know a lot about the laterals. So trying to figure out, you know, has a lateral been repaired in the last 10 years? Is it of material that makes sense? We definitely want to do that in a large enough scale so that it makes sense to do that. And then, you know, we are kind of, these projects, the project packages on an annual basis, it'll become a lot more like our annual street pavement maintenance projects, where we know a year in advance what we're doing. We're talking to the property owners while we're building another, you know, the other projects. So we're just kind of moving through on a year by year basis. So to us, the first year is that pilot project, and it won't be on the scale of 1 to 3 homes, but it'll be on a scale that we think will be manageable.
Commissioner Smith, you have anything for us?
No, no more than that.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Actually, I have quite a bit. First thing I want to say is I think Oregon City is probably well ahead of every other participating community that's engaged with WES in this would-be partnership. We've gathered more data than anybody else, and I have no faith in WES participating financially because at this point I've asked them to participate even in our studies, and they have declined. So I am a man of little faith with them. I'm going to present two things. One is simply this. If it were up to me, my direction would be to put this on hold tonight, and here's why. First is the relationship with WES and their refusal to provide a breakdown of each participating community as to the total amount of product they have to process. And you know, Oregon City knows our values. That's only a two-element thing. What does Oregon City put in, and what is the total they process? That's an easy question to answer, but they refuse to answer it. So the question is, how much demand does Oregon City put on their system? So if Oregon City residents were to bear this cost, then why don't Oregon City ratepayers get the benefits of this? For example, if we drove down the total amount of processing that WES had to do by 10% because of Oregon City's efforts, why doesn't Oregon City residents benefit from this versus all participants that are part of this WES program? So that part really makes me struggle. The other thing is, we look at those numbers, and I'm concerned to place an additional financial burden on households that are currently unemployed or have significantly reduced incomes. And for those two reasons, both the financial burden, but mainly because of WES's refusal to provide numbers. And again, if we're going to expend money within our community to make the WES operation more efficient, why should that expenditure benefit all as opposed to those who have participated and driven the amount of product that WES has to produce, driven that number down? And that's my statement.
Commissioner Smith?
I agree completely. And you'll never get the numbers, no matter what. So good luck with that. They will refuse to give us any answers on any realistic questions, and I don't ever see that changing.
Thanks,
I'll
sir.
say this. I don't care about their letter of support. I want to see them open their wallet and participate in this if they're going to be the beneficiary of it.
A letter from support from WES is a red flag in anything that comes before us.
Commissioner Lyle Smith, you got anything?
Yes, I actually have a few questions. So I feel like I'm a little confused on why this is called a pilot program and why is there an opt-in, opt-out option. I feel like those two things are tied together, but I'm trying to figure out, why is it a pilot? Is it that we don't know if the solutions will actually fix the problem and we're testing our solutions? Like, a pilot is a test. So I'm trying to figure out what we're testing.
Well, we've been in our conversations with Murray Smith. Other agencies have typically referred to these first couple year programs as pilot programs. So that kind of got us started thinking about that. It's not about whether it's effective or not. Although we do, if done wrong, right? For instance, if we use faulty material or, something like that, we might not be as effective as we would want to be. But by taking it to the house, the likelihood of effectiveness is really, really high, right? Because we're getting it all the way to the house. So this isn't so much a pilot program about effectiveness with I&I reduction. It's more about the pilot program with regard to, is the code written just right? Is our interaction and ability to get property owners to participate? That's more of the kind of the pilot program that we're talking about, right? One thing that I've shared internally is, we adopted a capital improvement plan. We adopted rates for sewer, and it had an I&I component to it that we were going to go through the what do we call them? The projects where we expanded the pipe sizes, moratorium projects. So that was the first part of the program. We've got through that. And then those monies were to go into the I&I rehab program. We didn't know exactly what that entailed, but through our work with others and learning what others are doing, the work that we kind of scoped was inside the right of way. Taking it beyond the property lines is something that we didn't necessarily anticipate doing under the rates that we looked at. So, there is some questions about how far we can get this funding to stretch. I think if we do it in a methodical way where we're going and identifying and surveying those neighborhoods to find out how many laterals are there. Again, not sure if it's going to be 50% or require 90% replacement. So that's why it feels to us like a pilot program.
Okay,
There's a learning curve here for us.
So even though you have maps showing all of the red pipes and the blue and green dots, you're not sure that all of those are issues?
No, the maps that were shown on there were about our public system. We know about our public system.
And all of those are our issues in the public system?
Those aren't as much as what we're talking about tonight as the things beyond the private property line on private property. So if you remember from the Murray Smith, there was some different rates of reduction. So if you're dealing with just the right of way, the main line work, there was, I don't remember the percentages, but it was something like 20%. If you take that, to the property line, then there was an additional, 10%. And then, but if you take it all the way to the property line or to the house, within 5 feet of the house, the reduction rate was above 65%. So it's much more effective.
So this pilot program is to see how many people in these neighborhoods will agree to the program or want to fix their pipes? I mean,
no, I think the really the opt-in piece of that, because you did ask that question, I didn't answer that. The opt-in piece is, do you want to participate under this project or do you want to do this on your own, right? Is the deal that the city is offering to do it with the contractor that they've bid the work with at their unit prices something that you'll accept, or are you, knowing what you know now about this lateral, are you saying, no, I want to fix that myself?
When would they have to fix it?
We would have to establish that in the code. I don't remember how we wrote that up, but the idea would be to put that in the code.
So the code would be used to essentially enforce it or tell homeowners that it's their responsibility.
Right. I don't know if you remember that number, Bob, but the code, some of the specific things about the code are making, laterals with infiltration in them illegal.
Okay, so, sorry, I have a few more questions. So with the presentation, so you talked about 3 methods of doing the work. Are you planning to use all 3 methods? Is it whichever one best fits the property, or were you using that just to come up with the average cost?
We were kind of using that to come up with various cost ranges. I think it depends a whole lot on the individual property conditions, but I also know that more often than not, when you do a project like that, if you're trying to mix all 3 technologies, for instance, that's a much harder project for bidders to bid, and you get less bids. Typically what you do is you figure out where your problems are and what kind of problems you have, and then you identify a solution, whether it be slip liner or a bursting project, or they've got cured in place, or do you just have to go out and dig up every lateral? And the thing that concerns me about the digging up every lateral is, well, we're talking our older neighborhoods here, right? So established yards. So it'd be much better for us to be able to dig a small pit at the house and dig a small pit out in the street and do some kind of a trenchless mechanism to where we leave everything in between as is, whether it be retaining walls, sidewalks, landscape, trees, whatever.
So that's where, if I'm understanding this correctly, so all 3 options are on the table, and that's where the flat rate option for customers could be beneficial, because one customer could have the more expensive need, because they were different, right? The alternatives for fixing the laterals? They were,
and we just took an average of those. So we're trying to average to get to a, at the end of the day, we feel like there should be a set rate so that we know, the customer knows what they are going to contribute to the program.
At what point do you know the lateral length?
So the,
Like, is there a way to estimate it now to give homeowners a heads up? Or is it that you really don't know the lateral length until you get out there on the ground?
so Bob, Bob, you want to describe your, well, let me just say quickly, the lateral lengths, we can assume where the connection is out in the street because we know where the main line is. What we don't know is exactly how it connects on the house. Is it on the left side, the right side? Is it in the back? Is it in the front? Those kind of things. So,
But you really won't know until the customer opts in. That's where the flat rate is most beneficial for the customer versus the tiered and how they could be surprised.
the way we're writing the code is that we would get authorization to even put a camera in that private lateral. We put a camera in that private lateral and we'll know at that point in time, and we'd be able to talk to the property owner. But if we have a flat rate, the beauty of that is they know what they're paying before we TV it, or, you know, they know you're in the neighborhood. The only thing you don't know is if your lateral's been repaired before. If that's the case and we determine that it doesn't need to be fixed, then you would have no charge. But if there was a repair on there, you would have a flat rate. And we think that's responsible and reasonable way to go.
And so we haven't talked much about the budget implications to us sharing the cost. And you said like 2.4 million was already allocated for this biennium, I believe. So was that just for this project, or was that assuming a shared cost?
That's for this program, the I&I program. So
Okay.
between our main lines, between everything that's in the public right of way, and now with the laterals, we would build a project around that budget.
Oh, okay. And that would include our assistance to homeowners
That's right.
within that 2.4 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'll go again.
Commissioner O'Donnell, you had something?
Well, a question for John Lewis. Have you approached Wes about seeing if they care to participate in the costs we're going to incur in just studying these laterals?
No, I haven't, but I intended to, and I'm interested in, if there's a strategy there that the commission desires. I feel like trying to present that with the staff who aren't the board folks necessarily. They're in my mind, they understand a lot more about this and would be able to at least help get to a decision that might be more favorable. So, it was my intent to call them sooner rather than later, but I know that there's also these WES advisory meetings that, don't necessarily involve staff. So I'd like to take a run at that. And, Bob meets with them pretty regularly as well. So, but it's more about, technical, different programs that they're doing or we're doing. But
Well, let me jump in here. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I've got no issues with the technical aspects of the presentation. I have no questions of Bob. My statement remains the same. You're going to ask Oregon City residents to incur significant financial billing to make the West facility more efficient, possibly reduce the amount of product they have to process and drive their costs down, yet there's no benefit to the ratepayers in this community. And my say is let's do things in a sequence. Let's see if West wants to open their wallet and help out with this, knowing that they're going to be the beneficiary of a more efficient operation. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Smith?
So I think by memory, Wes was talking about kind of working with each city individually, which if they're going to each city individually making different deals, then I think that even adds more questions on the quality and how they're deciding which cities are paying for what percentages of this project, because it doesn't seem like they're being consistent in that. So I guess that would be my other question, how they're going to, if they're making different deals with each city, how does that relate to being consistent, and can they show us the methodology behind where they're coming up with those different deals for different cities? Because clearly there's issues with age of pipe and all of the different things that cities have, but are they going to be able to show us that and say, well, this is why we've decided to pay us, contribute a certain amount to this city versus Oregon City? If they can't answer that question, that would even raise more concerns. for me.
Commissioner Smith, I totally agree with you. In conversations that I've had, not only with Wes, but offline with Gladstone and Westland and other folks, it's clear that Wes is going to work with Gladstone on some kind of a capital deal because they don't have any money to spend.
Right.
So the question is equity between Gladstone, Oregon City, and Westland and the Tri-City Service District.
Right.
And I will continue to use that term Tri-City Service District because so far they have not made any legal effort to combine the two entities. I'm of the opinion that I agree with Commissioner Smith and Commissioner O'Donnell that until we have some of those questions worked out with Wes, as far as, you know, whether they're going to give us money up front to help do the program or whether we're going to get a rate reduction in exchange for doing the program, and until we can get some actual data, which I've only been trying for ever since day one of being mayor, the first time to get from Wes, I think that that this is a program that we should put on hold until we get some of those questions answered.
Mayor, can I
Sure.
respond a little bit? So great points. It seems we're focused pretty heavily on Wes. Couple things that I want to point out. When we did the moratorium projects, right? We built those pipelines bigger, but we didn't go crazy bigger, right? And so whether it be upstream of a lot of these projects are upstream of what we built in the moratorium projects, and some of them are outside of those areas. My main concern is this is a treatment plant issue. It's also a collection system issue. So we need to be thinking about our own capacity within our own pipes. And, you know, a lot of the engineering that went into the moratorium projects assumed some I&I reduction. And this is low-hanging, I mean, we're going to start the first couple of years with low-hanging fruit, places where really our main lines are crumbling, falling apart, have lots of problems with them, and we should fix those. I guess the other little piece to this is we've been collecting flow data, TV data, smoke testing data over several years worth of contracts. I think it's important for you to understand that we'd like to keep that ball moving forward. We can talk to Wes for the next probably year about participation and while we're doing some of these other things that we've shared with you in our plan. So I understand the concerns with Wes, and I think those are good arguments. I don't want to feel like we have to come to a rolling stop on some of these other things that we're trying to move forward that are really good for Oregon City first, right?
Mr. Smith.
Can you put back up the slide that shows the breakdown of the 2.4 million? And I'm interested to know, out of the line items on that slide, which ones do you think are high priority, benefit Oregon City, that maybe doesn't get into the private lateral piece? Because your statement I keep going back, makes me think that that there's some issues with our own main lines that we could be working on to keep the ball moving forward without ever going back to our customers. And it's not this one, I think it's before this one.
I think the answer to that question, Commissioner, is that when you're doing the main lines, you want to be doing the laterals at the same time, because once you've dug up the street, you want to be able to go out and fix it all the way to wherever it's going.
So the 2.4 million is essentially a piece of this 10.4 that you have on the screen right here.
Right. It's a program, and the details of exactly which main lines, exactly how we fix that main line, exactly which laterals and how we fix those, those are things that still to come. And, but it's always been our plan to move forward with a program. Even if it doesn't include the private side, we just think it's going to be less effective at reducing I&I. And
that might be a point of negotiation with Wes.
Perfect.
Yeah, if we could, the piece that I want to cue you up for, because like I said, we're going to be bringing forward some code amendments that are not just sewer related, but some others that are related to other things that are in the other topics. That comes, Josh is gonna bring that topic on the 9th. This idea of us being able to inspect a lateral is pretty important. That's one of the first things that has to happen. So we'd like to get we'll bring that back, but I just wanted you to know that that's kind of one of the first things that we need to move in. Bob would like to get a TV inspection contract moving forward.
I would like to see if Wes will participate in that financially.
So is there a motion?
No, this is a work session.
Oh, is this
Work
just
session.
sorry.
What is it that do you need more from us?
Yeah, well, so.
I think there was a slide that had all the questions on it.
Right.
Maybe it's a staff report.
I guess, I know the commission supports I&I reduction. We know that. We presented some fee models. The question of Wes is a good one. I just, we'd kind of like to get to, if we have an $8,400 lateral average cost, do you like that set number versus a variable number? 24 months versus 48 months? That's, we're going to bring you back the specifics that and we just want to make sure it kind of has the right thing in there so you're not frustrated with what we brought you. So.
Well, I don't think that I'm going to be satisfied until I understand where Wes is going to be as far as participating or rebating rates or whatever the case may be. So the rest of those questions are really moot until we understand what that's going to be. The fact is that, Wes likes to talk about regionality as long as it's good for them. But until, once it starts costing them stuff, then they're quite a bit more reticent to be able to participate. And so far, all the regionalism has gone towards Wes and not supported Oregon City at all. So until I have some confirmation in writing from Wes saying this is how they're going to participate, I'm not terribly interested in moving very much farther forward with this.
And the chances of that happening are slim from Wes.
Well, I got the best deal I could last time. So maybe with some more work, we can get something out of Wes. But it really is going to depend. Now we have a new county chair to deal with. So that's going to change the dynamic some as well.
True, absolutely.
Could I ask a quick question?
Mr. Conkle.
Fully understand. We will reach out to Wes immediately and begin those conversations. Because of the sequencing of steps, and I do believe that the commission does support I&I in some fashion.
Sure.
And Commissioner O'Donnell, you said you want to see if Wes would participate in the scoping project of the camera scopes. Is that I'm sorry?
Yes to that, and yes to the totality of the project. Because to me, when you talk about sequencing, the first milestone in the sequencing is what is Wes's financial commitment to assist with all aspects of this project, starting with the lateral evaluations. Because if they're nothing, then that's our starting point. The rest, I agree with the mayor. In fact, my motion would take exactly what he presented. Until I have those answers, I am not prepared to move forward in any way, shape, or form.
Is that the consensus of the commission?
Seeing if there is a part of this that we can continue to move forward. I agree that, you've got momentum going. There may be something we can do in the interim to keep this project on task. I understand the concerns. I don't have the history that the two commissioners do with Wes, because my history with them is, as Dan stated, the mayor stated, is Tri-Cities. That's who I dealt with. So I know that organization. I don't know this new, whatever they're calling Wes, whatever they're calling themselves there. So I guess I support the I&I. I think it's important. I also understand Commissioner O'Donnell's concern that that we give as many options as possible. Again, we have a community that is not financially solvent as we would like them to be, and I think we have to be very careful how we step forward with this, and as many options as we can do to help people is appropriate, and giving them a longer time to do this. I mean, we don't really know, you know, as a homeowner in one of those areas, I don't know whether I have a situation. I mean, I think I might, but, you know, I won't know until you guys come over and check it out and tell me what, you know, needs to be done. And I'm sure other people are in the same situation. So I think, first of all, you know, knowing what the situation is going to be a benefit to homeowners, and then you move to step two. But I do agree we should have some participation. But if there's any, what I'm concerned about is that the stalling could continue from now until Timbuktu, and then where are we? You know, we're still having the problems that we're facing right now with the systems. So I don't know if is there a tiny step we could take, a small step?
I think what Tony suggested was we'll reach out to them right away. I'm getting texts coming in right now from Josh who's saying we have talked to them and that they're talking more of a larger kind of a grant program or something like that. So, but we haven't finalized any of that. So they are talking about that. One of my big concerns is sometimes the code that we need written to be able to even implement something like a TV inspection program takes time to get through the system. And if we're planning to bring forward as early as our next meeting some proposals for code changes, and you know, I don't want this commission to be upset about us bringing those. I think those are important. That's a pretty important first step in it, and it's not a big cost first step.
Bring the code. It's up to the commission if they're interested in moving forward with the discussion that you've had tonight or not. I think that's what we need.
So the code changes include like these fees and kind of gets to that?
We can split that out. I really want to get to doing a TV inspection program of private laterals.
Has that gone to the planning commission?
We're just about to submit. Well, we've actually submitted for land use approval on some of these, so there'll be opportunity to.
So why are you bringing us code revisions that haven't met with the planning commission yet?
Because we want to make sure you know what's coming. We don't want to go through all that process if we're going to trip up over an idea like this.
What are the land use implications of this?
I don't think that they're land use implications. They're maintenance, right?
Right. So, but their Title 13 doesn't really. I don't think that the planning commission generally deals with Title 13, do they?
Laura, do you want to step up at all? I know there's various.
Hold on, I'm going to stop this right now. I want to hear whether Commissioner Smith and Commissioner O'Donnell are in favor of moving forward or waiting until we hear from Wes.
I am not in favor of moving forward until I hear some information from Wes.
Commissioner Smith. I'm only putting you on the spot because you're the one guy who has as much experience with Wes as the other two of us.
Well, I mean, I understand our staff's point on this and wanting to do something. The problem is, you know, if we move forward with this, it's kind of a show of faith that we're working forward. And how are we going to be able to get the answers from Wes that we want without saying we're not doing anything until you answer these questions? And I don't know how else to do it because they've never answered our questions. They refuse to answer our questions for a decade, and I don't see them answering them ever unless we do something, to say we have to have this information.
I think I understand where you're coming from, sir. Commissioner Lyle Smith?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm similar to Commissioner McGriff that I don't have a ton of experience dealing with Wes, so I am relying on the other three. I understand what Commissioner Smith is saying. It sounds like, if we just approve it, then Wes has no reason to bargain with us.
Right.
And if we don't approve it at this point, then we still have leverage to actually have a negotiation or a conversation with Wes.
Okay, go ahead. We've burned up 50 minutes and we still have another presentation.
I was just saying.
Go ahead.
If we could get some sort of answer from them by the next meeting, then we could, we can move forward.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. It took me 5 years.
I know.
So I think you have a consensus, and we'll move on to Ms. Turway's presentation.
Thank you very much. One of the city.
Excuse me, Mr. Ray. I'm going to have to step out for a minute. You can take it until I get back.
One of the City Commission goals is to increase the livability for the citizens. I am proud to introduce Pete Walters, Senior Planner at the city, to talk about our update to our comprehensive plan.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. Our comprehensive plan. Oh, sorry, I'll wait for the presentation to come up. Great, thank you. So this is the first update, full update of our comprehensive plan since 2003. And I'm going to be presenting our process for the very first part of this, which is developing a community vision. Next slide. The comprehensive plan is a roadmap for decision-making for city staff and officials. We use the goals and policies in the plan to evaluate and make decisions about new development, existing neighborhoods, transportation, and a variety of other topics. It's a living and working document based on a shared community vision, and it forms the basis for our multiple decisions. Next slide. This includes determining how we address growth, establish our values as a community, and it begins with the visioning and listening phase. The update phase that follows will be broken up into chapters that implement the vision. Next slide, please. There will be 4 general phases for this update, with community engagement from the project beginning through the adoption of the plan in late 2021. The visioning process will wrap up in January 2021, then phase into the actual plan update process. Next slide, please. About the logo, the project logo was designed by Oregon City High School exchange student from Russia, Platon Kropotkin. I think I said that right. He was a student in one of Commissioner Smith's graphic design classes. There were almost 50 designs submitted, and we think it's a clean and attractive design that provides a very clear and recognizable brand for the project. And we'd like to thank you, Commissioner Smith, and especially Platon for his outstanding and creative design. Next slide, please. In order for this engagement process to be meaningful and effective, we must acknowledge that previous planning efforts have implicitly excluded underrepresented populations, resulting in the creation of policies that may not serve the community in a truly equitable way, and overlook the needs of communities of color, the economically disadvantaged, and other groups who may not feel comfortable engaging with local government. Next slide, please. Our objectives are intended to remedy this situation through a robust and transparent outreach process. From visioning through to the update, we'll be listening to the community. Our outreach efforts will ensure that all citizens have the opportunity to understand how decisions are made, that their concerns are heard, and that they know how their feedback influences the planning process and subsequent policy updates. The next slide discusses the communication tools we plan to use. To these activities, the following tools will provide information about events, activities, and opportunities to be involved in the community vision. We'll provide community members with information about the project and engage them in discussions about what they value about Oregon City today and what changes they'd like to see in the future, as well as how they'd like to be involved in the process moving forward. Next slide, please. This slide lists the activities and communication tools for developing a community vision. These are outlined in more detail in the report. Where applicable, alternative strategies are discussed in the engagement plan for in-person gatherings that are restricted due to the current uncertainties of COVID-19. Before initiating each activity, the project team will assess current conditions and refine the strategy or approach behind each activity or tool to meet project needs and engage a full range of community center members. Next slide, please. The initial listening phase of the visioning process will start now and continue until the end of October. Then there will be a 4-month period where we craft and refine the vision. And in February and March of 2021, we'll begin the process of writing the new plan based on the vision. Thank you. Next slide. That's all we have. We thank you, and we look forward to any suggestions that the Commission wishes to make to refine this draft public engagement plan. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll open it up for questions and comments. Commissioner McGriff, you have anything?
Thank you, Commissioner Lyle Smith. So the basis of the visioning, are you looking at this? Well, let me back up. So let me just say that whatever happened to the goal of having neighborhood-based planning in Oregon City, so all of those things feed into the larger picture of the comprehensive plan. We do have some fairly, obviously, as you're aware, very diverse neighborhoods. They aren't all the same. Different conditions exist in each one of them that don't apply to the other, but there are a few that do cross all of the lines for the neighborhood associations. So how are we going to attempt to make sure that we are addressing the needs of those particular communities, and how does all that going to fit into the bigger picture rather than it being, you know, very general like it's been? And obviously you and I have been through many comprehensive plan updates in our lifetimes, including our city manager.
Yes. That's a great question. And we take our neighborhood associations very, very seriously. We've tried to empower the Citizen Involvement Committee as much as possible in this planning process as the representatives of the neighborhood associations. And they will be getting frequent updates and giving frequent input on the visioning process.
I think, Commissioner McGriff, if I'm recalling correctly, in our existing comprehensive plan, we talk about neighborhood planning. And I think that's probably an area where, while we were, I think, successful in the urban growth boundary areas, we were less successful citywide with specific communities.
We were less successful with the existing areas. I mean, obviously, I strongly supported the concept planning because we all felt, I think that this was the basis of the way to go. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that we need to do it to that degree through this process, but I think there needs to be some acknowledgement of those also being distinct communities as the same as South End and Park Place and Beaver Creek, because they all, again, different personalities.
I think maybe that's a conversation topic of whether that becomes a plan policy again that hopefully we're more successful with, mm-hmm. or if that's included into the city's document. Does that make sense? I think it was a plan policy that we hit the mark in the UGB areas, and we missed the mark in some other aspects.
As you know, I have a concern about the one-size-fits-all scenario.
Right.
It doesn't, not in Oregon City.
The one thing that I really like about the design of this process is that we start with a community vision. So we're asking everybody these general, broad questions to get feedback to see where they want to go. We know that we have to comply with state law, but we don't know what an ideal city looks like and what those policies that the community wants. So we don't know what the solution is yet. We really are listening to all the feedback that we're getting from the community in the community visioning to help drive then later those goals and policies that maybe include more neighborhood planning or something like that.
So you mean what our city should look like? Because you just said city, so that was fairly generic. You're talking about specifically Oregon City. Because
I am.
We don't want to talk about, well, we could tell West Linn what we think, but will they care?
And we're also going out to urban growth boundary areas as well with the project.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
First of all, I want to thank Pete and our Community Development Director, Laura, for allowing my students to be part of that process, the graphic design. My 2 classes in winter trimester before we were out of school on COVID leave or break, were able to kind of work a week-long planning and designing of a logo. So all my students in 2 different classes contributed to that planning. And so I think that was a really cool process. I really try to allow my students the opportunity to do design work that is actually for a real purpose or a real thing. And so this is a really good process to get students involved. So there's a heading under the draft that says logo branding. So if the information from that slide that you shared could go in there, I think that would be awesome. And Clayton actually just flew back to Russia on Saturday. So I'll probably email him some of this stuff so he can see it. The other question I had, the other comments I had is, in question is, there's some talk here about a program for gift cards and surveys. That's separate from what we're talking about later tonight with the tourism stuff and the economic development. Those are two different things, right? Or is it kind of combined?
That's correct. They're two separate things.
Okay. Okay, and then Jim Nacita sent us an email, or sent a group of us an email with a list of maybe some partners or organizations that might be included. So if I would recommend taking a look at those and decide, figuring out how that fits in.
Are we going to have
But it looks
student
good.
representative?
Great.
So what was your question?
Are we going to have a student, any sort of youth represented? Did we think about,
There is a youth section
Okay,
in the
perfect.
stakeholders list. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.
So to wrap up, I have a couple of comments. I saw this presentation at the CIC, or one similar to this. I was going to bring up, I agree with Commissioner McGriff. I would be interested to know how the neighborhoods are being involved more than just the CIC. You may be able to hit some, but not all in the next couple of months, but at least an attempt to reach out to them and get their input would be really good, especially since they are in our current comprehensive plan and part of Goal 1. And then to piggyback on what Commissioner Smith said, I appreciated the public comment that we received from Mr. Nacita. I thought that he had some good suggestions on trying to provide more equity, or some other organizations. Specifically, he mentioned maybe the tribes, and perhaps the Willamette Falls Heritage Foundation. And so anyway, I just wanted, for the record, to let him know that I appreciated the email and I thought they were good suggestions. Yeah, so, and I love the logo. I think it was a great idea. It was a great project. And I think it looks great. It helps your project if it can be branded and has a message, and people can coalesce around that branding and messaging. It will hopefully make the project more successful. I certainly hope it is a success. So if any other
I just have a tongue-in-cheek comment.
Okay.
Please tell me we're not going to use dots. Dots, remember we were putting dots on paper? How many red dots over here?
I make no promises. We still use dots. How can we can't promise that? We use squares.
I'm just making a comment because we had people take more dots than they were supposed to when they put all their dots. It's not an equitable dot situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
All right, so I think that's
because he
it.
remembers that.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you for
perfect.
the comments. Those are great.
Or
So
for
we
you.
can kind of switch over.
Yes. We're going to adjourn this meeting, and we will come back to our regular city commission meeting at 7:15, and meeting's adjourned.